This week on To the Contrary. First, what's causing the classroom gender gap? Then, is GOP contender Donald Trump sexist? Behind the headlines, Rwandan women rising, how women rebuilt a nation. Hello, I'm Bonnie Urbay. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, the gender gap in education. Why do girls outperform boys in school? It's a question that has stumped experts since the trend began in the 1950s. New research by a team of economists from MIT, Northwestern, and the University of Florida may have the answer. According to their analysis, the gender gap was minimal for boys from affluent families. It was also slim at the top schools in Florida, but the worst performing schools showed the largest gap between boys and girls. Even after controlling for the fact that economic disadvantages and upbringing can cause boys problems, the gap persists, which means the schools themselves are part of the issue. The study says more research is necessary to identify the specific problems in schools that are making the gap persist. So, Debra Carnahan, men outperform women in the workforce, and yet girls outperform boys in school. How does that work?
Bonnie, I think there's a different criteria in academics for evaluation than there is in the workforce.
There's some compelling data that shows that reading proficiency is one of the reasons that girls outperform. However, there are no tests gauging reading proficiency in the workplace, so I'm mystified, just like these experts. What could it be?
I think it has something to do with the way we punish kids in school, but then in the workplace, it's plain discrimination in my book.
I think we need to remember that boys and girls are fundamentally different. They are often told that they are going to be taught in the same way, and it doesn't work for little boys.
Why?
Boys have trouble concentrating. Elementary school children often have trouble concentrating and getting organized, sitting still. And so they're punished more often. They don't get as good at grades, they don't get as many awards, and fewer young men are heading off to college.
And why is it that money, affluent families, better schools can deal with it and low-income schools can't deal with it?
Well, I'm not sure. I think, Deborah, you and I have spoken about that, about how this is way more complex than the economics at home. I think just because boys are coming from more affluent backgrounds doesn't necessarily close that gender gap. I'm not convinced on that.
But Bonnie, I have had children in both private and public schools around the same age, and the private schools have more resources to deal with behavioral issues, not necessarily bad, but energy issues. For example, in the private school, they're running around doing their science experiments. They're not sitting at the desk like they were in the public school. They started their days with headsets on, listening to music and reading, or you could go outside and play. There were just different ways of dealing with the energy of the children, which I think comes into play between boys and girls at that age.
Yeah, and I also think that we just are more punitive in how we deal with discipline problems in public school than we are in private schools.
How so and why? Because there are more problems, there are fewer resources?
No, there's been a lot of data on how we choose to punish kids, and we are more punitive in low-income schools. Yes. We are more likely to have a school-to-prison pipeline set up there. We're more likely to have resource officers in schools based on the income level of the children who go there, even more so than based on the type of issues that you have, behavioral problems that you have at the school. So those schools that are made up of predominantly people who are poor are more likely to experience punitive problems. When you're suspended, you're getting zeros for those days that you're missing, and that's going to have impacts on your GPA.
And I think we also have to remember the fact that in poorer communities, there's more single parents. My children have been home for snow days, and I don't know how single moms do it, but there is less discipline in single parent households. The children get less attention, and I think that translates to the school. So we can't forget that that's also a part of it.
Also, some more data I came across said that time spent on homework is another reason that girls outperform boys in school. Girls spend more time on their homework, and going back to your point of, basically who's policing you at home, those affluent homes perhaps, where parents have more time and two parents are there, like you also said, they have more time to give their children to spend on homework. They're more structured.
Well, one question, I'm kind of surprised that none of you in the open round robin said that the reason that boys perform less well when they're young and outperform women when they're older is that sexism doesn't set in. I mean, little kids aren't sexist, right? It's culture. It's culture that exacerbates the differences between the genders?
I definitely believe it's culture that exacerbates it. And, but people are very sort of clannish in terms of who they play with, what's girly, what's not. So there are some elements of, like, baby sexism, I think, that goes on.
This is definitely a problem that needs to be addressed. And I don't like to do pop psychology. And I feel like we don't have enough data in front of them. There's some really good questions that need to be figured out. But I really don't think we have enough yet. I mean, we could talk about the fact that women think with 2 lobes at one time and men only think with 1 lobe. So, what is our academic structure that doesn't set well with men and boys being more focused this way and girls being better at the multitasking?
But I do think for years that we have sort of been told there's no differences with the genders. There's no differences. We're all equal. And we are all equal, but there are differences. And I think one thing that the schools really need to do, and teachers, and we've had wonderful teachers, and I think teachers are doing such a good job under difficult
circumstances. And they get picked on much.
And so I don't mean to pick on them, but I do think the culture at schools and in the leadership at schools, we need to remember that boys and girls are different, and that's okay, and celebrate those differences. That might result in some improvements.
But why is it that we teach in a way that's more girl-friendly? We teach little kids, young kids, elementary school kids, even junior high school kids, in a way that's more female-friendly than male-friendly.
Well, I'd love to have the statistics on how many female teachers we have in elementary and secondary schools versus male teachers. I think that might have a great deal to do with it.
And it also has to do with a new trend in schools, which is a zero-tolerance policy for doing things like nibbling a Pop-Tart into the shape of a gun. Now, kids do this, boys do this, they do silly things, and I'm sort of surprised my own children. I haven't gotten the call about a Nerf gun being smuggled in a backpack. But these zero-tolerance policies are very harmful to boys. It says you're a problem, you're on the wrong track, and I think that those policies also need to stop.
And when did they come along? What's the history of the zero tolerance?
I think you can probably trace it a lot back to the fear of school violence, and I feel a lot of sympathy actually for school administrators who parents want safety to be number one, but then you have these policies that are developed that end up hurting the kids for doing, things that boys do.
Exactly.
I mean, it would seem a relatively easy fix to tell low-income schools not to penalize boys so much, to get money from somewhere or take a teacher from somewhere and set up programs. Let them go boxing, let them go running, let them go play football, whatever they want to do, and get it out of their system.
You're relying on logic, Bob. It has nothing to do with the
equation. Look what we're doing. We're cutting recess time more and more out of our public schools, and even some of our private schools. But when I hear less recess, maybe only twice a week, I think, are you crazy? Let these kids move. Let them go. Let them get their energy out so they can sit and focus.
A new study came out that said kids are getting on average 4 to 7 minutes of outdoor play a day. Now, that's not enough.
That's crazy.
And that's why you have these boys.
What about indoor? What about gymnasium?
Some
what
indoor,
about basketball? What about?
We're talking about free play outside in the air. This is the American Academy of Pediatrics says this is critical to the mental health of children.
And it promotes development and performance in school. It boosts it. We all know that, and I think you're onto something there, and that study is as well.
But is that more important for boys than girls?
Look, I'm a mom of 3 boys, so I'll speak personally that, my goodness, they are wild men when they come out of school. and I know a lot of girls I am amazed. They sit down, they color, they're polite, they're quiet. So I know it's a generalization, but I have to say physical exercise is incredibly important for boys.
All right, let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie or Bay or at To The Contrary. From performance gaps to political games. The final GOP debate before next week's first presidential contest, the Iowa caucuses, went on without Republican frontrunner Donald Trump. Instead, Trump hosted an Iowa fundraiser for veterans and wounded warriors. He boycotted the Fox News Google debate because Fox refused to bump anchor Megyn Kelly as one of the moderators. Trump exploded last summer when she asked him in a debate to explain offensive comments he made denigrating women. Trump charges Kelly treated him unfairly then and later in commentary about him. Fox put out a statement saying, quote, "The Ayatollah and Putin both intend to treat Donald Trump unfairly when they meet with him if he becomes president," end quote. On Twitter, Trump responded, "I refuse to call Megyn Kelly a bimbo because that would not be politically correct. Instead, I will only call her a lightweight reporter." So, Rina Shah, if he said, "I'm not going to call her a bimbo," isn't that like calling her a bimbo, and was it sexist?
It was completely sexist, and to call her a lightweight reporter after that was even worse. I mean, I think civility...
Well, I mean, even Ted Cruz said in the Republican debate, let's get it out in the open. We're all fat and stupid and ugly and idiots, and, so now we're beyond Trump not being here.
Yeah, I mean, he has thrown civility out the window. It no longer exists in, unfortunately, the GOP primary because of him. I think, going back to the Megyn Kelly point, though, I really, really think that was unfair. And I'm not saying that sitting here as a woman. I mean, I was never really a fan of Megyn Kelly, but I was not a fan. I was also not a fan, right? Not a fan, rather. What I mean to say is that she was doing her job. It was her journalistic duty to ask the question she asked him about, 5 months ago? And this has been going on for 5 months. It's a little ridiculous. The woman was doing her job. She asked a very fair question, and he slammed her for it. I think it was completely sexist. He says he cherishes women. Let's be honest, Donald Trump cherishes no one but himself.
Exactly. I mean,
is he sexist?
Yes. Yes. And, actually, though, I think he was quite shrewd.
I have to tell you, I can't recall. It's just too long a list of the number of sexist men who will say, "I love my daughter, I love my wife, my wife's a big success," blah, 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 right?
That's like a close
It's like
second.
Some of my best friends are.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say. It's like a close second to, I have a black friend. It's just like that.
Right.
He's clearly sexist. And I really think the real deal is that he's afraid of her. Clearly, she is an excellent journalist, and I would have loved to have seen whatever video clips they had waiting for him, because they were prepared with that debate the other night. And so I think that he respects her to the contrary of what he's actually saying. He respects her to such a great degree that he's afraid to go head to head with her, because he can tell that she's not afraid to ask him the tough questions.
Sure. Yeah. I think women, and particularly moms, are really good at spotting a temper tantrum. And that is what I can spot one. And I think that's what people are seeing now, that he threw a temper tantrum because she asked him a tough question. And if you watched the debate last night, she does not reserve that for Trump. Everybody got tough questions. As you said, this is her journalistic duty. And so I think it's really unsavory how he's treated her. I think that Megyn Kelly also is popular, not just with Fox viewers or Republican women. People like her. Sally Cohn, who's a noted liberal commentator, she wrote a wonderful piece about Megyn Kelly, how she's great to work with, she's a great mentor. And so I think there's an appreciation of Megyn Kelly as a person, as a journalist, and I don't think it was smart what he's done to attack her.
Well, isn't tantrums, all my children are four-legged, but I can spot a series of explosions. His candidacy has been nothing but tantrum after tantrum after tantrum, and yet he still got a lot of supporters in the Republican Party.
His life is a tantrum, okay? It's just, there's never a break. But the other thing that's so dangerous to me about Donald Trump is he goes to the lowest common denominator that he can find. And so it's negativity, it's anti-intellectualism.
Somebody did a study of how he speaks. He speaks at a fourth grade level.
Yes.
Yeah. Truly.
Yes. And So to that point, that is what is dangerous about him. And that he's rallying the anger and the hatred and the frustration, and not in an intelligent way, but in a very scary way, and in a school board bully way. Yeah. And then they go, he's our bully. He's a bully.
Yeah. Do you either of you know Republican women who are supporting him?
I've heard of those women, yeah. And I mean, they are not my friends. They're not people I choose to align myself with.
What's in it for them?
I will say, look, I think that he has tapped into dissatisfaction with the Republican establishment, and I understand that. Now, I don't agree with supporting Donald Trump, but I understand, we've sort of caricaturized all of anybody who supports Trump as this weird hillbilly who hates everyone and likes that he goes off the handle. But I think there is genuine dissatisfaction with the party process, Republican, Democrat.
That's what the Tea Party was all about,
that's
right?
right. And so he's
it's
sort
just
of
getting magnified.
Yes, he's tapped into that a little bit. And so I'm always cautious
But
to
what
say
about
that
women? I mean, you could see where a guy would be drawn to his particularly, I have to say, less educated men would be drawn to his, bravado and machismo.
Right.
But what about women?
I have to say that totally baffles me. Rosie O'Donnell is, she's no conservative. When he treated her that way, the stuff that he said about her, that turned my stomach. I don't want anyone treated that way under any circumstances. And so I am baffled by particularly...
I think he gets forgiven.
Go ahead.
I think he gets forgiven because of other issues. And knowing some of the women that I know that support Trump, immigration is huge.
Yes.
They care about that more than the snarkiness or Megyn Kelly or any of that stuff. There are some stark, hard issues that he taps into. And women don't just vote in women's interests. We've seen this over the years. We don't have a woman president yet. If we were voting just for women interests, we'd probably have a woman president.
Yeah, but they're immigration and making other countries pay for military support and, carpet bombing the terrorists and banning Muslims. Those are his most out front issues, right? They're also about the only ones that he hasn't done 180s on, because just a scant 5 years ago, Megyn Kelly, in his opinion, was a fabulous journalist, a wonderful reporter. Okay, now he's against her. 20 years ago, I'm totally pro-choice, he told NBC News. Now he's pro-life. And he's also a huge Christian, although he can't really quote the Bible correctly. Doesn't that, except for those 4 signature issues, don't women worry about that? I mean, there's not an issue he hasn't changed his mind on completely. And there were reports, I saw a report online, some friend from New York said, he is a New Yorker, he's a liberal, this is not the man I know. So there's evidence out there that he's just pandering for votes. Why don't women see through that?
Well, I don't know. I can't even explain what women would really support that. I know that there are some, and I don't really get it. But I would say that he knows to tap into the foundation that has been built. I think you're exactly right. He tapped into the Tea Party madness, and he's ratcheted it up a notch. And now, unfortunately for the Republican Party, they have built this straw horse that they cannot take control of.
And I submit to you one thing here. What trumps, no pun intended, what trumps every other issue is national security. I was listening to an interview on NPR on Friday morning of an Iowa woman who talked about wanting to keep her kids safe. She said, my kids are growing up in a world where there's not a day that goes by without a terrorist threat. And she thinks Trump is her guy on that. And that trumps everything else.
Yeah,
again,
the security moms.
No pun intended.
Here we go again with the
And he's
with
brilliant at marketing. He's a reality TV guy. He built a successful reality TV show. I mean, he knows how to tap in to what people want.
Empires.
But he's getting a lot of help from the media who can't stop talking about him.
And some of these simple messages, I'm going to build a wall, you're going to love it. And
it's going to be a beautiful wall.
It's going to be a beautiful wall. And he says things like, I'm going to deport the criminals. Who disagrees with this? If we have people who come in illegally, then they commit crimes, rapes, murders, whatever. Nobody disagrees that those people should probably be deported. So there is, underneath all the bluster, he does sometimes propose something that a lot of people think are common sense policies, and that attracts women.
And we gotta run. Behind the headlines, the rise of Rwanda's women. After the 1994 genocide that wiped out 20% of the Rwandan population, the Hutu and Tutsi women, whose relatives had been slaughtering each other, joined forces to rebuild their country.
Every Rwandan, no matter what age, had seen someone killed. That's how massive and how thorough and how widespread and integrated into all the communities this was.
Rwandan Women Rising by Ambassador Swanee Hunt revisits the political transformation the country underwent after a massacre that claimed the lives of nearly 800,000 Rwandans. She recalls telling the Rwandan president, Paul Kagame, the importance of placing power in women's hands.
I was asked to come and speak at a meeting called Women as Partners for Peace. I said to the president, the most important thing I think you could do for Rwanda right now, in order to attract people to want to help, is to elevate women, because people look at Congo, Rwanda, Burundi, all the wars, and they say, you know, the me warrior. And it's like, it's awful. Who wants to get involved? But if you have women in leadership and speaking, that has a very different feel to it.
With so many Rwandan men killed or in prison, women's inclusion in politics and government soared quickly.
They got themselves on the Constitutional Commission after the genocide to create a new constitution. And there, 30% of the seats in the parliament were reserved women only. And if you just take the parliament, they were in the 40 percentile of the whole parliament, and then the 50 percentile, 56, and there was going to be another election. But at that point, they became 64% of the parliament.
For Rwandan women in power who wanted to help other women gain political clout, it wasn't easy. Almost all Tutsi women who survived had been raped, some gang raped, until they were unconscious. Still, the Tutsi women worked with the Hutu women.
You can just imagine if you're sitting next to the mother of someone who killed your 3 children, and she's trying to come to terms with the fact that her boys and men did that to your family. So somehow they start working together. They all started cooking together in big volumes so that the Tutsi survivors would have food for their families at home, and the Hutu women would have something to take to the prison. To the perpetrators of the violence against those Tutsi women.
Post-genocide, trials were conducted in neighboring Arusha, Tanzania. Women who suffered atrocities were called on to testify. Ambassador Hunt shares a passage from her book detailing threats both women and men received for speaking with court investigators.
Even though the women's names weren't given, in the community they were known. It was easy to figure out who was giving testimony. Even before they went to Arusha, they faced aggression in their village. I remember one kept finding notes slipped under her door from someone threatening to kill her if she spoke out.
Despite the horrors, survivors, particularly women, changed the face of Rwanda.
If you look at Rwanda now, women are half the Supreme Court, half the cabinet, this great majority in the parliament. What difference has it made? Well, Rwanda, in a decade, doubled the life expectancy. They reduced infant child mortality to a small percent. They tackled gender-based violence, meaning domestic violence, rape, and others. And that's the work of the women.
So, Avis, what can we learn from the Rwandan women? Does it have to take a war, a genocide, to get women to make peace and rebuild a nation together?
I hope not. I think what happened here is that women were given the opportunity. I think this speaks
because the men were all dead.
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly. So this speaks to the healing power and also the legislative power of women to get beyond challenges and produce substantive change.
This story pulls at my heartstrings as the daughter of somebody with 3 generations of Ugandan roots, and having spent a month in 4 countries in Africa myself, I can tell you I've witnessed the resilience, the willpower and dedication of African women, and I think this is beautiful. It shows you that women's empowerment is not just a buzzword, a buzz phrase. This is real women's empowerment. This is how we can change some serious societal problems if we learn from them.
You know, Ambassador Hunt is leading an effort. She set up an institute to get women more involved in peacemaking and nation rebuilding. Ambassador Verveer, who was the first U.S. global ambassador on women's issues, is doing the same thing at Georgetown University. Why is it taking so much effort to get involved, to get women involved in peacemaking? I mean, it should be obvious, right?
It should be very obvious, Bonnie, and I think we have to look at who puts those women in place. And in this case, we have President Obama that put those women there. And I think, that we have to focus on who we have in power.
Put them where? Are you talking about the Rwandan women?
Well, as an ambassador, yeah. Yeah. And Hillary Clinton, State Department with Mon.
Right.
I mean, but that's all part of the Obama administration. And I think we have to be more inclusive of women and focus. And we have the right to demand that from our government, that they put more women in these positions.
This is an incredibly meaningful story, particularly at a time when we are hearing horrifying stories about the conditions of women, particularly in ISIS-held areas. It is really, it's been very depressing, I think, for women to see the conditions that many women are facing now. So this is a wonderful story. And what's also great is that they've improved the conditions for all Rwandans.
And built up the economy, I might add. That's it for this edition of To the Contrary. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/to the contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.